Thank you guys, you ladies, for being here today. Obviously, we know why we're here and the importance of what we're trying to do, and just want to basically start out with just an introduction, name, branch of service, MOS, and why you decided to join.
My name is Brittany Westerman. I served in the Navy for 10 years. I was a cryptologic technician maintenance. I joined the Navy specifically. My family kind of has a history of serving in the Navy. I wanted to get out of my small town of West Point, Nebraska, 3,000 people, and kind of go see the world and, have an impact on something and, kind of just learn and experience life outside of small town Nebraska.
Are you still in or
No.
you out?
Nope, I got out after 10 years.
Okay.
So I am Diana Kreppel, and I was in the Nebraska Army National Guard as a medic, and I got out in 2013. My dad was a medic, so I guess that's kind of also where I in the Army National Guard as well, so that's kind of how I had heard about it. And then I actually joined when I was probably 24, so I already had a college degree. And I was not quite sure what I was going to do after college, and so I thought the Army National Guard would be good for me.
Good. Describe your overall experience in the military.
I enjoyed it for the most part. I got to travel a lot, got to go really cool places. I was stationed in Hawaii, so I couldn't complain about that.
Yeah.
San Diego, San Antonio. I worked in the intel community, so it was kind of the bougier side of the Navy. I learned a lot. I enjoyed my job. I guess I would say I didn't always enjoy the politics of the military. I thought being a woman was a disadvantage at times. I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it. I'm proud of what I did, but I'm glad to be done.
So I don't really have any complaints. It's funny though that you bring up the travel because before I joined, I'm like, oh, I'll be able to travel with the Army National Guard, go to all these cool places. And I think Fort Dodge, Iowa, and Iraq were the only places I ended up traveling to. So needless to say, it wasn't that great. But I really don't have any complaints. I did my 6 years, and I think where I'm at in life now, a lot of it has to do with my military experience.
So 6 years and called it quits.
Yes, I did. Yeah. I don't know that when I joined, I really thought that I was going to be a lifelong soldier. At that time in my life, I was debating on what I was going to do. I even considered the Peace Corps, but they weren't going to, I was going to make my bills if I joined the Peace Corps where I wasn't getting paid. So, my dad had talked very high of his service as a medic in the Guard. I already had healthcare experience. So basically everything pointed to that, take that next step in my life. So, but yeah, I did end up choosing to get out.
What years was your father in the military?
That I could not tell you. During Vietnam.
Okay,
I know he
so
did, yeah, so it's been a while.
was he in the Vietnam War?
No, he not.
Just
No.
the era?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious as to how you felt about the resources that were offered to you while being in the military. Do you think that resources were easier to get for men than women or women than men?
I would say I think one of the biggest differences of resources for women, from my experience on active duty, was a lot of medical stuff was a lot different. Men would kind of just go in, go out, do their thing. Every time I went into medical, it was always, are you pregnant? Could you be pregnant? Are you on birth control? No. Do you want to be? And I felt like they always pushed you to do that.
To be on birth control?
Yes.
Okay.
So no matter what you said, there was never an answer that you could give where they wouldn't try to push that on you. So several times I did give in, and then when you want to get off of it or get something taken out, it's like a big deal. So it's obviously not something that men have to go through. And I worked in the intel community, so when it came to services or resources like counseling, it's kind of frowned upon, and everybody's always afraid that their clearance would be in jeopardy if they went to counseling or received any kind of mental health treatment. So when I was stationed in Hawaii, I was in an abusive relationship with another active duty military person. And I received a lot of criticism for going to counseling like right off the bat, and everybody said, you're going to lose your clearance, you're going to get kicked out, and I felt like it was the right thing to do. So I started counseling probably 2 weeks later. Still had a black eye and stitches in my lip when I started, so I think depending on where you are, what you're doing, services like counseling or mental health are kind of frowned upon. I wouldn't say that's a difference between men and women, but just in general, I think in the Intel community, it was a really big deal about getting mental health treatment or admitting any kind of weakness when it came to mental health or anything like that. It was a pretty big issue.
I would say, yeah, there's probably a stigma that comes with it that would prevent you from seeking those services. I think almost being a man would, just as a man, you may be less likely to even reach out for them, whereas a female might, being more about nurturing and relationships would be more apt to actually go out and seek those services versus a man.
Yeah.
And I definitely would be afraid of what would happen, especially in your occupation.
Right.
So this next question has to do with a statistic that just came out with the Department of Defense, who estimated that there were 20,500 instances of unwanted sexual contact in 2018. So based on that survey, they basically saying that was an increase of about 38%. Has any of you had any experience or one of you in one of those statistics?
Well, first of all, I was a sexual assault victim advocate in the Navy, so I know that those statistics are very, very low.
Okay.
I became a victim advocate because I was a victim myself. So I do know it obviously goes underreported. And I would say I think it's probably the worst at training commands because you have a lot of power imbalance. You have a lot of young sailors or other military members who don't know how the system works. I know this is kind of going to go into the next question, but a lot of kids in tech school, A school, AIT drink underage, which was my situation. So I did not report it because I thought I would get in trouble for being at a hotel, drinking underage. I had friends told me not to report it because they didn't want to get in trouble, especially my friend who bought the alcohol. So I never did, and that was 14 years ago. And I still go to counseling for some of those issues. So, because I kept my mouth shut for over 10 years and didn't say a word to anybody about it. I guess if this makes it in the documentary, my parents would probably find out for the first time. So, yeah, I think it's super low statistics.
Did you mentioned that you had sought out some counseling services, sort of, you felt like they were against what the military wanted you to do. You still went through those. Did you feel like those counseling sessions helped you? Or did you have any respect for the counselor? Because I think, in my experience, the counselors you have to have a good connection with a counselor. And if you don't have that connection, then you're not going to be able to trust that individual, and therefore it's just not going to work for you. Did you feel like those resources were good?
When I started counseling when I was stationed in Hawaii, I was going to the Soldier Assistance Center on Schofield Barracks. The counselor that I saw at first I thought was okay, and then I went in one day for my appointment and she was no longer there. So they never contacted me. So that day I started with a new person. So I had to start rehashing everything that I had already been through up to that point. And then I went back a couple weeks later and that counselor was also gone. So I restarted with a male who I did not get along with very well. I was on antidepressants and sleep medication at the time. So I felt like the psychiatrist that was prescribing me those medications was probably the one that helped me out the most. I was with her the whole time throughout the whole experience until I PCS from Hawaii. But I'd say she was probably the best, and she probably gave me the best counseling, even though that wasn't her job. I did a little bit more counseling when I was in San Diego. Didn't really like it so much. I was pretty much against it, just because I was tired of the turnover between different providers and things. So when I got out of the military, I was actually trying to get a physical to wrestle in college. So I went to the VA to get a physical done. First thing, birth control. Second thing, they see I was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and PTSD, so they would not let me leave the VA clinic in Omaha without a prescription for antidepressants, even though I was very much against it. I argued with her and said I wasn't going to take them. She told me I would lose my VA disability rating if I didn't take them. So I tried taking them. It made it worse. I told her that over the phone. She referred me to a civilian provider for a second opinion. He told me that the low dose that she had prescribed me was in fact a pretty significant dose. So I have never been back to the VA in Omaha since then. I moved to Lincoln after that, but that kind of turned me off from that. And then I moved to Lincoln and I started working in veteran services with the Department of Labor, and I got in contact with a lot of resources. So I actually started doing trauma counseling at the vet center in Lincoln, and I love the therapist I have there. I've been going there for a year and a half, almost 2 years. Some days we do trauma work, and some days I just talk about whatever I want to talk about. I really like her. She doesn't push me when she knows I'm not ready to talk about something. It's kind of whatever I'm up for the day as to what we do. So it took me a long time to find somebody that I did click with, that really is kind of bringing my care where I want it to go. Sometimes I talk about specific issues, and some days I come in and I'm like, okay, I know we were working on this, but now I got to talk about this. And she always lets me kind of drive my care, and she's fantastic. And
Good.
I know she provides good care for other people too. So
I was guard, so I was always part civilian. When I joined, I was also 24, so a lot of statistics will say that it's usually lower enlisted, and usually alcohol's involved when these events happen. So I don't know if my view is kind of skewed on it. I don't know if is it strictly a military problem, or is it just across the board? This is just an issue. I don't know. Do you feel like it just was? I guess I'm asking you as an active duty person.
Well, I went to college for 2 years before I joined the Navy, and I graduated high school at 17, so I went to a college campus at 17. And I don't really know. I guess it wasn't my scene. I was kind of a sheltered good girl at the time. So I'm not really sure about, like college campuses or, kids that graduate high school and kind of just go straight to the workforce. I just know, when I got to the military, you get out of boot camp and you get released on your AIT, your A school, tech school, and you have money and you have freedom, and there's no parents around, and you're kind of free to do what you want.
Right.
And you're in a different place, you don't really have a support system, and you're trying to make friends, and you don't always know who's your true friend. And I learned that, I guess, the hard way when that happened to me, and my friends, people I thought were my friends, were telling me not to report it just so they wouldn't get in trouble. But it also made me realize to be more careful about who I talk to, who I befriend, what kind of situations I put myself in. So I think it's an overwhelming problem in society in general. I just think the military's culture and the way kids are kind of thrown into it, that maybe exacerbates it a little bit.
I agree with that.
So you had to choose out of fear whether you were going to report an assault, which is a whole nother topic, but I'm sure maybe you had possibly heard or knew of other females who reported incidents, whether it was sexual assault, domestic violence. Do you feel like those that did report those situations were taken seriously? Do you feel like a lot of the accused in situations like that the allegations are dismissed, whether it's in court or whatever the case?
I guess in my situation, obviously they got away with it, and I had to look at them every day until I left Pensacola, Florida, so that was pretty rough. And I felt like they knew what they did was wrong, and they'd kind of, sometimes I get like the smug look on my face or on their face, but I guess being the sexual assault victim advocate made me realize that at least in the situation or the cases I had, that a lot of times nothing was really done about it.
Okay, so the reports was made, but it just sort of disappeared?
I think it always comes down to a he said, she said, and sometimes some of the cases I'd be with the victim at, off base military police station or civilian police station, or sometimes I'd be at NCIS with them. And it almost made me glad in another way that I didn't report mine, because I saw them basically get ripped apart and everything was scrutinized. A lot of what I would call victim shaming. It's not pretty, not at all. I mean, I had to stop interviews with detectives several times who were berating the victims that I was there with, and it's not pretty, and a lot of these girls will never be the same.
Right.
So I don't know. And then I guess in my situation with being in a domestic violence situation, when we were both active duty, couldn't really hide it because my face was busted up. But I got blamed for a lot of things that I don't feel like were my fault or justified the situation at all. The civilian side did press charges against my now ex-husband, but the Navy pressed charges against both of us. So I was being prosecuted for assault, for unlawfully putting my hands on his chest as he broke my nose, fractured my orbital bone, and busted up my lip. So I guess in that situation I was also kind of victim shamed and, made to feel like I did something wrong when I was just trying to protect myself. And they told me that they had to press charges against me to press charges against him. So when they dropped the charges against me, and this is the military side,
Right.
then they dropped charges against him. On the civilian side, he pled down from domestic assault to harassment with physical contact. He had to do an anger management class and 2 group therapy sessions, and his charges were dismissed. So I don't think that's a military problem specifically either. I think that's a systemic problem.
Okay. Have you had any personal experiences or knew anybody close that went through these situations?
To be honest, I can't really think of any that come to mind. I just know that, we always had a SARC with the Army Guard, somebody that we could go to, and I can't recall what you had said it was, the position that you had filled. And I know people that have filled the position too that have talked about stories where, just terrible stories that had happened. To me, I guess if it's happening most often with the younger enlistees, I mean, even the strength to even go and report that at that age, like you were saying, you're new to meeting these people usually. They're not the people that you've been surrounded by your whole life. So I think at that age, it would take a whole lot of strength to even go and report it. But I know when I was in, I knew there were resources, and I knew that I could go to the SARC if I had to. And I've talked to some other members in the military who say that theirs is very active in their role and does a very good job. So I get it. Whether it goes, I don't know. I hope that it doesn't go, I don't want to say underreporting because that's the wrong word, but what was the question you had said that? If it goes, I guess, if they overlook it. So if it's reported and overlooked.
Did they overlook them or don't take them serious, or, do you?
Historically, I think probably yes all the time. It probably happened. I don't know that I would say it's often now because I don't know what the incentive to overlook it would be. As far as, like I said, you have a SARC and you have other people to go to. I think it's spoken about more now. And then you do have those individuals, that come forward and say, that hopefully shows others that they can come forward if they need to.
What places were you deployed to, or?
In Baghdad.
Okay. How long were you in Baghdad for?
I think it was like 9 months.
Okay.
Maybe 9 months of that.
How about you, Brittany?
I was on a ship for 5 years, so I wouldn't say we were always deployed, but we were in and out of San Diego frequently. And then I deployed to the Middle East. We were kind of over in the Horn of Africa area, right outside of the Gulf, during the height of bombing Syria in 2014.
How you sort of mentioned you had 6 years in. it wasn't really a plan for you to stay in for a long time, but was there anything specific that made you get out when you did?
That's the one question I get asked all the time, and I really don't have a good answer for it. I was going to go back to nursing school, which I'd already started, or actually, I guess I had graduated nursing school when I got out. I wanted my weekends back. You know, I drilled on the weekends. I missed out on a lot of family events, friends events, just because you don't get out of drill. And I really don't have a good. I considered staying in, and for me, I just decided I was just gonna. The civilian life was more for me.
Yeah, you got your experience and you got out. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were in for 10 years?
Correct.
And why did you decide to get out?
I think it was a multitude of reasons. Kind of the same thing. I was tired of missing holidays and, different family events, weddings, Husker games. I was kind of tired of being by myself and moving around. I wasn't happy, I guess, with where I was at in my military career. I was an E6 when I got out, and the jump from E6 to E7 in the Navy is a pretty big jump. It's kind of like the good old boys club, and I didn't see myself fitting in with that. So I figured it was 10 years. I had to make my decision then, and I was pretty sure I wanted to get out about the 8-year mark. And then I lost my grandfather at the beginning of that year, and then my brother to suicide that year. So I was like, yep, I'm done. I'm getting out. I'm going home to be with my family and, start the next chapter in my life while I still had, I don't want to say time, but while I was young enough to kind of restart a different career.
I think it also goes to with any job, are you satisfied where you're at? Is there room for advancement? I too was an E6 when I got out, but I had, recently taken a promotion to a different unit. So I was now in this new unit, and it wasn't the unit that I deployed with and trained with for years, that I really had grown to love. And I was in this new unit. The job that I was doing wasn't really all that fulfilling, and I was, just like if you're in a job that, you have great room for advancement, great mentorship, I think it really makes a difference where I was just like, stay in, but, I'm ready to move on.